Kia ora, and welcome to From the Ground Up. I'm your host, Hirana Tangiora, and I'm a lecturer and a PhD student here at Lincoln University. This podcast is about all the fantastic research being undertaken by our postgrad students right here at Lincoln and the real-world impact it has. In each episode, we'll sit down with brilliant minds to uncover fresh ideas, share inspiring research stories, and explore their student journey. Today, I'm catching up with Oakley Campbell, who's researching an issue affecting surfers across Aotearoa and potentially the world. He's looking at how changes to surf spots and coastal areas can affect the people and communities who care about them. He's specifically looking at the emotional experience called solastalgia in surfing communities, which I'm very excited to learn more about. Oakley's been at Lincoln from his undergrad degree all the way through, and outside of his studies, it's no surprise he loves to surf. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Oakley. It's so good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, would you mind by starting to tell us a little bit about yourself and your PhD study?
Sure. So I'm in my fourth year now of my study for PhD, and I've been at Lincoln since 2015, so it's been a while, a pretty long journey, and I'm researching basically how people feel about changing surf environments and places.
Great. And what else have you done here at Lincoln in 10 years?
I enrolled in a landscape architecture program, which I dropped out of after a semester, and then went travelling for a semester and then came back to Lincoln and changed to environmental management, and then stumbled my way through that for another semester and eventually changed to the BES, which was a Bachelor of Environment and Society, and kind of found my footing a bit more there, and I don't know, followed my nose ever since, I guess.
Interesting. Good to know that you can start something, pivot, change if you need to.
And finished a few things along the way. Just one more thing to finish as well. So
absolutely. You're getting pretty good at it. You're knowing these halls pretty well.
For sure.
Are you local? Did you grow up around here?
I grew up in Timaru, but my mum's family's from Leeston, just down the road. So I kind of spent a lot of time in the area and grew up going to the Banks Peninsula every summer. So feel like it's kind of second home in a way.
Great. And did you always think you would go to university, or was that a bit of a surprise to yourself?
When I left school, all I knew was that I wanted to leave Timaru. So when I finished my last day of school, I drove to the Bay of Plenty and got a job at a top 10. And that was as far as my plans went. And then somehow I ended up enrolling for, I don't really know how it happened, for landscape architecture. It seemed like a good idea. It wasn't too deliberate, but...
Exactly. Whatever decisions you made at the time got you to being here with us at Lincoln, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a bit about what first inspired you to pursue this area of PhD research?
It would have been at the end of my undergrad with BS, and I had a particular professor who was kind of he reached out to me and he said, hey, your work's reasonable, and if you apply yourself, there's you could for sure look at postgrad. And that kind of prompted me to maybe take myself a bit more seriously and consider my opportunities. And then I enrolled, and it was the NAMI, I don't think it still exists, which is an international-based master's. And he basically said, the university has a scholarship for flights, think about it as an opportunity, to travel and then come back and do some research. And he said that, knowing who I was as a student, that he's encouraged me to pick something that was really of interest to me, and don't just choose something that you feel like is necessarily going to lead to a job or should be studied. He said, to stay inspired, you'll need to choose something that is really important to you. And I went home and thought about it for a while and settled on researching surfing. So that's what I did in my master's, and then I've sort of followed that through now to my PhD as well.
I'm guessing for someone to decide that they want to do a PhD on surfing, they know their way around a surfboard and the odd wave?
Not as well as I'd like to, but I've been trying for long enough anyway that I'm pretty passionate about it, but there's always room to improve for sure.
Absolutely.
And it was a good excuse at the time to travel New Zealand with a surfboard while doing interviews and research, so that was cool.
It does sound like living the dream a little bit.
For sure, when you're out there, and then I'm at a computer probably more than I'm in the water, but it's a pretty good balance, really.
Definitely. And based on your comment before, I guess just highlighting how important it is to have that person, I guess, to believe in you and help you see a potential research pathway.
I mean, you just always feel sort of connected to staff in a kind of personal way that I'm not sure you would get at other institutions. And it was really beneficial for me, and it's something I really value about Lincoln for sure.
Agreed. And is that sort of the main reason you chose to continue your PhD studies here at Lincoln, or was there any other factors that you considered?
No, I mean, that was pretty important to me. And also there were people who were, Hamish Rennie, who works here, who was super involved in surf break management research. So he was super encouraging of the kind of work I was looking at and has been a pretty good influence in terms of that. So that was another reason as well.
Great. Yeah, I guess might as well stay where these passionate and expert people are that you get along with.
For sure, yeah. Makes sense.
Now, we're not super coastal here in Lincoln, so
No.
I'm interested to understand how, studying at a place like this really helps your research.
I think in terms of like my personal research process and thinking about it, I mean, Lincoln's a place where it has quite a strong identity, which sometimes people from other places can be disparaging towards. But when I think you recognize kind of the meaning and value in a place that's important to you, and you also recognize that other people don't see that, it kind of makes you want to not necessarily advocate for it, but it also cautions you to not be too critical of judging other places. And in terms of surf research, there's kind of a bit of a tendency to see it as not legitimate or kind of dismiss it a little bit. So I think that, my experiences at Lincoln encouraged me to, take a stance on what I see as important and what's valuable to me, and I don't know, try and not spread the message, but just kind of take a stance on what I think is, or what is I recognise invaluable and feel justified in feeling that way, I guess.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you're a great ambassador for surf research and for Lincoln University.
Yeah, hopefully. I also just want to clarify that I don't mind Timaru. I did want to leave after my last day of school, but I've been back since. So
I feel like you can be forgiven. A lot of people want to have a change of scenery and from the town that they grew up, so no worries there. Now, do you work as well as doing your PhD studies, or are you a full-time PhD student?
I've been fortunate enough to pick up some research work, which I've done since the beginning of my thesis. And actually that's with another academic who is based in Christchurch, who is also really involved in surf research in New Zealand. And New Zealand is one of the probably leading countries really in terms of surf research. So it's been a pretty good setup, which has been cool.
Great. That's so fortunate that you have also found yourself here, as have these other interested academics too.
Yeah, totally.
And how has working in research projects and studying your PhD helped to shape your overall research journey? I'm guessing it has.
It's definitely helps you hone those skills, but it also, I think, it's been a bit of a challenge. I used to do landscaping and kind of orchard work through my undergrad and my master's, and having that split is actually really nice. I'm someone that likes being outdoors and doing things, so when you're forced to do a lot of PhD at a desk, it's sometimes nice to have that split. But I mean, really it's beneficial in terms of opportunities that come with research and learning to write and learning to research and all of those things. That sort of helps streamline it. Definitely.
Cannot do too much of that in terms of skill development.
For sure.
Awesome. And do you find our surroundings out here at Lincoln, it's quite outdoorsy, as referenced, help keep your research grounded in the real world? Totally.
I mean, I guess it comes a bit like, I guess personally I've always felt like I kind of have a foot in a few different worlds. Like I didn't grow up on a farm, but I was exposed to, my father was a vet, so I went to farms and we had a lifestyle block, but I also was a keen skateboarder, and I dreamed of like moving to Barcelona and having this big like urban life, and I've ended up kind of veering away from that. But I always feel like Lincoln's this place where you can sort of pursue what you want and you don't have to be limited to, I don't know, there's the city, there's the gardens, it's all kind of available. If you want to try and access it, it's up to you to kind of make the most of it, I think.
Definitely. It's sort of just up to your imagination, really. Awesome. Now, coming to your PhD and your topic specifically, what is the core research question or problem that you're trying to answer?
I was just trying to write this before it came up, so just clarify it. But the main idea I'm interested in is essentially how people feel about surf places being degraded. And it seems like sort of an obvious question, but there's a lot of research which looks, why these places are valuable or how we could protect them, but no one's sort of asked the simple question of, what actually happens when we fail to do that. So that was my intention, really.
I love it. Answering the simple questions to give people something to think about. And further to that, Oakley, who do you hope will benefit most from your work?
I'd really like it just to contribute to, I guess, the body of work which says, hey, not just our outdoor spaces, but our outdoor spaces and the areas which people value and give meaning to their lives are worth protecting, particularly, and this is something I've found in my research, that often people don't necessarily feel like they can, or they don't feel justified in how important places are to them, and they're not necessarily willing to speak up for that. And I just hope it encourages people to, advocate for the places they care about, I would say.
That sounds great. And in terms of following that train of thought, what kind of impact do you think your findings could have on, I guess, our economy, our communities, and the environment?
The economy is people always like to see, surfing, what does it matter? But I mean, there's been studies done which show the economic value of surfing, but I hope that holistically, all of those things are supported by protecting environmental places for people, the values of the environment which exist there, and the ways in which we make money from land or from industry, I think, are all supported by a healthy environment. So
it's critical.
Yep.
And I think you said that New Zealand is sort of leading the way in terms of this space, or one of the countries leading the way.
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing at all a strong connection between what's happening here and overseas, even if the overseas research is less developed?
Just clarify, we're amongst the first countries to legally protect surfing areas, which is a huge success, but it doesn't actually mean that they're protected indefinitely and perfectly. I mean, recently there's been some changes to water standards, or proposed changes for sewage being released into the ocean, and that could have a huge impact. And those are things which actually in other countries have been a priority. In a way, we assumed we didn't have to think about it because we had already had it covered, but in a way we've sort of gone backwards. But it's definitely part of a global kind of trend of research, which I think is doing good things.
Absolutely. And like you say, people are not so sure on this surfing research, although it sounds very interesting to me. However, there's a whole lot of environmental and societal benefits that spin off it as well. You're contributing to this really big conversation, which is
I hope
great.
to, yeah.
Interested, Oakley, in hearing if New Zealand surf numbers are trending up, down, remaining static. What have you observed, if at all, throughout your research?
That's a good question, and I should have an answer for that. In my own experience, I know that they've been growing steadily. There's good research to show that, and the popularity has really taken off, especially post-COVID. Actually, there was a huge boom, but that's petering off a little bit. But I think you mentioned, the well-being benefits, and that's become a huge push for people to get out and be in the water, and I think it's definitely a reason it's increasingly popular.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
And it's a tricky thing for surfers. I mean, surfers, they want to encourage people to surf, but they also struggle when there's a lot of people at the surf break. But I think on balance, it's a good thing if more people are surfing.
And in terms of this trending up, which does sound really great overall, is that localised to anywhere in particular, or is that throughout the country?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's definitely one thing that's changed is technology. I mean, cold places down south, Dunedin, things, they used to be pretty empty because the water's so cold and it's so cold. But as wetsuits have got better and as surfing has got more popular, I mean, people are finding that surfers are spreading out sort of everywhere. But certainly hot spots like Raglan and Piha are particularly busy.
And how is it that you're able to sort of get these findings and publicise what you're doing domestically and globally? Have you been publishing any conferences, things like that?
I co-authored a paper, actually it was from my master's research, but it was a similar area of surf research, and I spoke on it at a New Zealand Coastal Society conference. But it's an interesting question. I think I see value in the academic kind of publishing route, but I really would like, once I've finished my thesis, to write some maybe just magazine articles or more sort of straightforward communication around it, the ideas. And I see a lot of value in that kind of, I guess it's science communication, I suppose, and communicating complex ideas simply for people to engage with, hopefully.
Yeah.
Would be the idea.
Can definitely see it having theoretical and practical applications. Just a little bit more work for you, but that's
yeah, for sure.
And what kind of methodologies are you using?
I used an oral history methodology, and that's something I've used in my research work as well, and it's something I'm really passionate about. I personally just find it really interesting to hear people's stories about who they are and where they come from and the places they've been and what they think about things, but it's a way of kind of elevating people's own experience to be useful information, especially when they might reflect on it just as, ho-hum, it's just their lives. But when you look at it, what it is and what they've experienced, it can teach us a lot, I think. So
Definitely. And how does that out of interest differ from the semi-structured interview method?
Semi-structured, I guess, would be a part of it. Typically, oral history, you can either look at people's whole lives or look at periods in people's lives. But I guess the approach, the key thing is to know, or to let their knowledge and their experiences be legitimized or the focus of the interview, and rather than go, And it's definitely semi-structured in the sense that, I have some questions prepared that I want to pursue, but often people go where they want to go and you just kind of have to go along with it. But that's often where the best material seems to come from anyway. So
Definitely, and I haven't come across that from PhD students so far, so thanks for sharing. That's
right.
Really interesting. Did you do your PhD just the one monograph, or did you do the with publication
just
method?
One big, long, rambling essay, hopefully not too rambling, but yeah.
Hence the diligence and perseverance themes.
For sure.
Yeah, in terms of finishing it off. And have you had any international collaborations or interest or connections in this research thus far?
Not personally. If I was more strategic with my research funding, I probably should have made that happen. And there was scope for it, especially, there was a conference where I think Tony Hawk was the famous skateboarder. He was headlining it or something. There's some cool events on, but I should have been more proactive in making that happen. But I definitely see it. I think my research will be meaningful in places. Not Queensland, but a state in Australia has just done a big assessment of the likelihood of climate change impacting a lot of their surf breaks. But they, that's without the knowledge of what that actually looks like for people. So I can see it kind of aligning there. But
Watch this space.
Fingers crossed.
Awesome. That's really great to hear a bit more about what you're actually studying. This is a brand new area for me, so much appreciated. So where have you collected your data from? Have you done it locally or have you travelled around New Zealand?
So I've been to 3 places. I went to Raglan, a Kiwi bar, which is on Great Barrier Island, and Sinclair Beach in Dunedin. And in each of those places, I was looking at a distinct form of change. In Raglan, it was social change and overcrowding. And Great Barrier Island, there was an estuary mouth which formed a wave which people had been surfing for 50 years, and then the estuary mouth now doesn't exist in the way it used to, and so there's no wave to be surfed.
Wow.
And in Sinclair, they built a seawall which now reverberates waves back into the lineup. So that's kind of where I've been looking.
Great. And I guess, like you say, you studied slightly different things in each location.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any commonalities you can draw between people in the social side of things in all 3? Or are they very much targeted to that specific place?
I would say that it's equally kind of disruptive to people, but to a different extent. One of the key things I've found is that, to go surfing is a means of making meaning and making place, and the ability to do that was impacted differently in each place. In Sinclair, you could do it, but maybe at high tide, you had less opportunity to do it, or in Raglan, there was no physical barriers to it, but it would depend on how many people were in the water, whereas in Kiwi, you could no longer ever do that. And so that impact for that community was really significant, especially, depression, people talked about, it was like losing a loved one and that sort of thing. So
if anything, you can sort of almost order those in terms of the Great Barrier one gone, Raglan one overcrowded, and maybe going, who knows, and then Dunedin, St Clair, putting a sort of stop in place to try and protect.
Yeah, well, interestingly, the St Clair one was to protect the beach, but And I guess by doing so, they degraded the surfing quality, actually, which is that's a big issue around the country, that, the way we manage the coastal environments needs to consider, not just what's on land, but also the places people value in the water.
So for us newbies, what does the term solastalgia mean?
Solastalgia, it's a sense of homesickness, you could say, but that you have from staying in your home. As the place you value changes around you, you feel this longing for what you used to have. And it's related to nostalgia being, this place or this period which you valued, which you've been removed from, but it's about having those similar feelings but still being in that place. And so I use that as a framing to explore the kind of emotional impacts of how surf places changed and what they meant for the people in them.
And are you happy to share any of your research findings with us?
Yeah, well, one of the main things I found, or I guess a key finding, is that, it can have a huge emotional toll for people to have places and means of making places that they value to no longer have that capacity to do. That really undermines not just, their surfing, but their sense of self and their sense of community and who they are and what they believe. And that's a really difficult thing for people to grapple with, especially when they're dependent on, one activity or one place for kind of stabilizing their broader sense of self.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And did you find that people were broadly aware of the fact that they had connected so much of their own, I guess, emotional state or identity to these places? Or was that a surprise for some of your participants as well?
It was a mixture, but it was interesting to note that a lot of people were actually quite self-aware about how important surfing was. And some people said, I'm not just single-minded, surfing's not the only thing I care about. For a lot of people, that was a really dominant force in shaping their lives and their decisions they'd made.
Wow.
And for those people, they have maybe less capacity to adjust to change when they're so reliant on a particular way of connecting with the environment and that sort of thing.
And have you seen any local initiatives that are sort of communities set up to try and combat some of the environmental degradation going on?
There was an active organisation called, I can't remember what it was, but it was about protecting surf breaks in New Zealand, but it's sort of quieted down a little bit, but it's certainly something which internationally is a big deal. And I think, unfortunately, it's not until places are threatened and people are aware that they're threatened that they speak up and express their concern. Places where people surf are particularly vulnerable, and the places that they, I argue that place arises from the act of doing surfing. And within that, there's like natural variability of, if there's waves, there's waves, and if there's not waves, there's not waves.
True.
And that means that this place that you value, I argue, actually isn't there in that instance.
Okay.
And it comes through from when you actually go surfing. And because beaches are surprisingly complex, wind comes from one side of the world and the sand has to be in the right spot and the rocks have to be here and the tide has to be this, that actually those opportunities are less frequent maybe than people would consider, and particularly in relation to like a land-based practice. It's a bit more sort of temporal and fluctuating. And then with climate change and coastal erosion and all of those things, it means that these places are, the likelihood of them changing dramatically is pretty high. So it's important to understand, how people value them and the ways in which they experience them and that sort of thing.
Definitely. I have been surfing a handful of times and I'm no good. So for now, I have hung up my surfing aspirations. But who knows, maybe I'll be back out there paddling one day.
For sure, no. Definitely recommend it.
Now, reflecting on your 4 years, I think you mentioned so far, what has been the most surprising or rewarding part of your PhD journey?
Probably not the answer I should say, but sticking with it's been rewarding and persevering. It's been challenging and I've had some personal stuff that's happened through it, and getting towards the end now is kind of quite exciting. But I think more generally it's a pretty rare opportunity you have to dedicate years of your life to looking at one thing you want to look at, and that's a pretty amazing thing. And it's something which is a little daunting to think that that'll be over as well, if depending on what the future holds in terms of employment and things. But it's a pretty cool opportunity, I think, really.
Definitely, it's special. And on the future, what are you hoping to do after your postgrad study is completed? I'm thinking a Tony Hawk headliner conference, maybe.
But yeah, I mean, for sure. My main ambition, I think, would be to maintain a connection to surfing in whatever job. That's always been a priority for me, and studies allowed me to do that. And it's a difficult thing, but I think hopefully, as my thesis would argue, that ability to maintain that connection is important for people. And that's a challenging thing to do, especially in the economic climate at the moment. But stay creative, I think, and see what happens. I mean, maybe completely veer off. I don't know. I'm not too locked into anything in particular. Open to whatever comes along.
Very cool. Could maybe be remaining here at Lincoln. You've spent a lot of time with us. It is Oakley.
Yeah, well, who knows? It's a possibility, but wait and see.
Definitely. Sounds good to still remain connected to surfing in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you see yourself continuing to contribute to that field in the future? You've mentioned maybe working in it. Can you see future research spin-offs from your current PhD topic?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and I mean, I briefly mentioned, but I mean, there's always opportunities, and I think unfortunately, especially around the world, things are, in terms of environmental protection or individual people's values and their meaning and their ability to create meaning is increasingly kind of challenged, when I guess if you asked me 10 years ago, I wouldn't have anticipated that. So I think it's important that hopefully I can maybe demonstrate the importance of these places, and when there's opportunities such as, water reforms or that kind of stuff, to chip in when possible.
Definitely. And I'm thinking with sort of, managed retreat or coastal erosion conversations, you would be quite a good person to have involved in those.
I think that's something I've realised through my research, the relevance of, really it boils down to how people are connected to the places they value and how they respond to those places changing, or with managed retreat, the requirement that they leave those places and what that means for communities, I think is super interesting and a difficult question for sure.
Absolutely. And I guess when I think about where some of New Zealand's surf beaches are, they are like, Raglan or Piha or the Mount. Mm-hmm. These are growing quite significantly as well. So I'm thinking, is infrastructure capacity part of your research too?
Yeah, well, one of the things I focused on is kind of the implications of, growth and mostly just the number of surfers in the water and what that means for people out there. And it's interesting, some people really struggle with that, but for other people it can be an opportunity to kind of practice what they see as their form of surfing, which isn't kind of this idea of an empty surf break with perfect waves. It could be a communal and social thing with lots of people getting in the way and finding the fun in that. But that can be a difficult thing for other people to rationalize. So
that's so true. Almost like competitive sport versus social sport.
That's a good way of putting it.
And in a past life of mine, I was aware of some organisations that were getting like farmers and growers off the land into surf, and as part of sort of a mental wellbeing and health program as well, which all sounded very positive. I'm not sure if you've come across any of this in your work.
Yeah, I think Surfing for Farmers might be the organisation you're talking about. But that's it's a really good case study that, especially with that program where sometimes they surf in urban places, but there's these really amazing places they surf, which are, for some people they might consider they're in the middle of nowhere, but recognising that they're particularly valuable for that, well-being benefits and for that particular community, I think, elevates their importance and why we should recognise them as being valuable and to protect them.
Absolutely. You can't sort of, fully understand what you can't see, right? So getting people to see these things
yeah, for sure,
goes a long way.
And I think sometimes it's been interesting, often this might be I might be kind of putting my own research down, but in a way that the people doing it sometimes don't necessarily, it's not that they're not aware of how valuable it is to them, but it's through the experiences of loss and when that place changes that you really get an idea of how important something was to you. I mean, I think we know that about a lot of things in life, but it's true of places and environments as well.
Absolutely. And I can imagine as a result, this oral history methodology would be a very cool way of letting people tell that narrative, that story.
And it's been interesting, people have, never really, it wasn't until I talked about it that I thought about it that way, and I kind of realized something in myself, often people also were reluctant to talk about it, which is a research challenge, but that in itself I found interesting. So
it's still a finding.
Yeah, exactly. It's written in there somewhere.
Exactly. And on challenges, you've got this benefit of 4 years, again, to look back. Has there been a key challenge that stands out for you along the way?
Diligence would be the key challenge, for sure. I mean, it's so much more productive to every day sit down and to engage with your research. And that's a hard thing to do for 3 years, and to sit there, and some days the ideas don't come and the words don't come, but you've still got to sit there anyway. And so that's been something I've got better at doing as the journey's gone on, but it's important for sure.
It's all, like you say, perseverance, showing up, trying to chip off a little bit every day.
Totally.
Wicked. And if someone was considering doing postgrad study here at Lincoln, either in your field or a land-based field, what advice would you give them based on the fact that you have been here for 10 years now?
I'd definitely recommend it, and I think the kind of the relationship you have with staff members and lecturers and library staff and people are so helpful, and it's transparent and it's authentic, and I think that I've found is really meaningful to doing good research and not feeling like you're part of this big kind of machine which is just churning along. But postgrad research it's a personal challenge as much as it is like an academic challenge, and that's really helpful for that whole process.
Agreed. The relationships you forge in a smaller place like ours are pretty helpful.
And especially with people who have done, worked in similar fields, but I mean, a lot of people know what it's like to study and to balance life with study, and it's been really helpful.
Great. And do you have 2 supervisors, 3?
I've got currently 3. I might have 2 because one might have retired, and I've had another one who's retired. I don't think it was because of me, but I think they just got to the end of their careers. But I've got 3, so 2 here at Lincoln and 1 through University of Canterbury.
Cool. And are they all in your field specifically, or are they chosen for different specialties? Yeah,
well, I think that's one of the good things about Lincoln as well, because there's people who are kind of experts in such a broad range of things, but work within kind of smaller units. That I've got people who are psychologists, environmental manager, or like ecology, and they all offer, really great insights and guidance. So that's been cool.
Nice. Sounds like a really well-balanced team you've found, even if there's been a couple of changes along the way, not related to you.
Hopefully not.
Just timing in general. Now, we've had this really rich and awesome discussion about your PhD, Oakley, but what is the one thing you would want people to take away from it?
I mean, I've sort of tried to say it a few times, and I feel like I've said it badly as well, but that the areas that you value are important because you value them, and that you should feel, like you're able to express how important places are to you, and that it's important that you do to ensure that they'll still be there for your own sake and for other people's sake.
I absolutely love that. And, it doesn't need this external validation necessarily. If you care about it, it matters enough. And if you do, then you should protect it.
For sure.
You can. Great. Now, hopefully we've got some listeners interested in your area after hearing our chat. How could they reach out to you if they were interested in knowing more or collaborating with you?
The best way would be my Lincoln Uni email address for sure.
Yeah.
Which is oakley.campbell@lincolnuni.ac.nz.
Great.
And happy to hear any communication.
Wonderful. And how long can we expect to still have you around under the Lincoln Uni student email, do you think?
Well, under the student email, hopefully not long at all, but maybe I've got a 6-month report due in a few days. So that says, I think, 3 or 4 months maybe. But
exciting. So you're near the very end.
I should be.
Yes. Oh, that's great. I mean, this is a big journey, but you're so close. And you're going to produce an awesome thesis, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Now we've just got 2 questions to wrap up our session today. The first one is, what would you do if you had $1 million of research funding towards your PhD?
Wow, that's a cool question. I would spend about a year thinking of a really good research idea, and in that time I'd be on a beach somewhere. But no, I don't know. One thing that hasn't been done, which I think is important and people talk about, is just actually compiling a list of all the surf places that have been damaged and degraded. And just knowing what that looks like and the extent of it, I think, would be a really valuable resource.
Definitely. I've seen these sort of surf maps of New Zealand, but never such a one shedding light, I guess, on degradation.
Yeah, and there's some numbers out there which would suggest that, it's kind of a bit alarming, the amount of surf places they can be completely lost sometimes and disappear. So I think that would be interesting.
And surely a tour of the world's hottest surf spots would fit into your budget.
Yeah, I mean, it would be necessary. You'd have to get a view of what high quality was and what low quality was. So.
Totally. And that global perspective, cross-country research. Cool. And final question for you today. What is your favourite food or fibre product?
Wow.
Only one.
That's cool. Well, I'll make it surf related. There's some cool stuff happening in the surf world at the moment where flax fibre is being used for the production of surfboards, and it's getting a lot of rave reviews in terms of its durability and its sustainability. So I'll go with flax fibre. Very
cool. A big thank you to Oakley Campbell for joining me today and sharing his research journey. Such an insightful kōrero. This has been From the Ground Up. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode and you want to hear more about our postgraduate research, as well as the people behind it, don't forget to rate, subscribe, and share this podcast with your friends and your whānau. See you next time.